Hey everyone, welcome to episode one of ASN Pull Up a Chair. Before I even get really started, I need to apologize for my stuffy nose. I got the flu a little bit here. I think I'm recovering, but I really want to get this show off the ground, so you'll just hopefully excuse my uh, coughing or whatever ends up coming up during this episode. Uh, so if you're here tonight, it's probably because you love the same things I do. The replay gaming, wing seasons, talking history with other developers or other gamers, and recreating history. The what ifs that come with doing replays, and those stories that come alive every game that you play, one roll at a time, one pull of a fact card, or if you're on a computer, one click at a time. They're all part of this game that we all love this hobby. Over the years, uh, I've played a lot of projects. Anybody who has followed what I've done knows I post a ton of stuff on social media. I share those results. I've built universes, and I've connected with so many people in this hobby. And something I hear over and over again is that folks want more places, more opportunities to talk about what they're doing and to hear and listen to what other people are doing. Having more perspectives, more conversation, and more than just one voice in a room, I think is really critical right now for our hobby. And that's what this show is all about. It's not replacing anything. I'm not competing with anything or anybody. I'm just trying to add another table to the hobby. A space where we can sit down and talk about our replays. What creative things that people have come up with. Um, you know, Talking about history. Sometimes the best conversations I've ever had is just sitting down with people and we just talk. We talk sports. And yes, part of that is what's in our hobby, but just talking sports with each other, learning about each other's paths and what they're passionate about, I think is a big deal. And I think is interesting, at least for me, and hopefully it is for you. Um, and so that's really one of the reasons I chose like this background. And I guess it's over here, whatever. I'm getting the wrong hand every time. But I want it to be more of a table-based, sit down kind of show. Uh, well, and just talk about stuff. And in that it's you, the gamer, coming on and talking with me. And it's also developers. And I think that the one thing that's missing in our hobby is not just having a developer showcase their latest offerings, um, or just showing their game. And I think that's important. I really do. I mean, that's a lot of us want to see that before we purchase. But I want to know who they are. I want to know their history. I want to know why they build what they built, or what inspired them to build what they built. And really important to me, and hopefully again to you, is what they have learned from our community. You know, because when I talk to developers, and I talk to them quite often, they have some pretty interesting perspectives of what the hobbyist wants or what they perceive they want. And it's great to get their perspective uh, because their perspective is what they build because they think they are providing you what you're looking for. And and I'm not saying they're off at all, 99.9% off, but I just think it's great to hear what they see and what they think and what their perspective is. So I just want to have a different angle when I talk to the developers. And most importantly, I want to get to know them. I want you to get to know them because you're purchasing in a lot of cases. Sometimes their offerings are free. It depends on what they're offering. But getting to know them, I think, for me, is important. It builds a trust factor. You know, I always use Keith Avalon as an example when I talk to people. Um, and I mean this in the absolute top respect to this, if you're watching this. Keith could build rock, paper, scissors right now, and everyone would buy it. And you know why? because he's built such a trust in the community right now with play games that everybody wants whatever Keith thinks of. And why? Because his perspective of what the gamer wants, because he plays, um, is pretty much right on. Like he built a trucking game and people flocked to it. He built a fishing game and people flocked to it. And those people include me. I didn't buy the trucking game, but I did buy the fishing game. So it was really cool. The point being is if we get to know these developers, we get to trust them and you get to believe that they can put together what we are looking for. And so I want more of that in my space here that we talk about, pull up the chair and learn more and what they're all about. And find out that these guys, you're going to find out that these guys are really just like they just have a developer mindset and they feed our hobby, which is absolutely incredible. So this space, what is this space? This space is for everyone. Whether you just discovered tabletop or just you people who just entered, like this week, that's incredible. Whether you're young, whether you're old, whether you're like me, old, um, it doesn't matter. I want to have segments and shows and discussions that everyone can relate to. Now, is everyone going to relate to everything? No, because if you're a long-time veteran like me, and this, I've done this for 50 years, am I going to be really interested in the newbie segment? Probably not. Although I'd probably watch it. But I think it's important because feeding our newbies and getting these people up to speed with what's all out there and what's available to them, they're all passionate, they're all excited about being here, and we all wants them. Yeah, and so we need to help them along and mentor them. And I think that's our job is to mentor people and show them along and show them what's out there and that there's just not one space for them to discuss tabletop gaming and that there's many spaces for them to look at many games and many opportunities to find the game that's right for you. And one day that will be a segment. Because I have a lot of opinions on what I think works and doesn't work. And you have a lot of opinions. Developers have a lot of opinions. And I want this to be the space where we get to freely talk about those without any negative feedback because opinions are not there for people to argue with. It is a person's opinion on what they think uh, of something about what they think works for them. And every single one of us is a little different. And that's why some people play EPA, some people play Strat, some people play Status Pro, some people play payoff pitch, some people play computer games, some people use fact cards, some people use dice. All of it is the same thing. It's this hobby. It's all part of this hobby. If you're in disagreement with that, that's okay. That's my opinion that it's all in this hobby. It may be shared by a lot of people. That's all part of this hobby. But that's what this show will be about. It's about the entire hobby, not a piece of it. Uh, Everyone is welcome. All is welcome. No matter how you participate in this hobby, it's all welcome. And anything outside of that, or any harshness toward that, just I don't want to sound negative. It won't be tolerated, but it won't be because this is an open spot to talk, an open space to talk and to have your opinions. It's not to rag at a a developer or a vendor, whatever you want to call them, um, or individuals. That is not what this show will be about. Will it point out some things that are shortcomings of different games? Absolutely. That is not a rag. The shortcoming is a person's opinion. Uh, and those are okay. It's all about how it's delivered. And I will have a discussion at some point on social media because I have a strong opinion. And one of the feeding things into doing this show is that when you type something out and you put it on social media, on Facebook, on Discord, or any of those sites where it's just words, I have a very strong opinion on how that turns negative, can turn negative, let's put it that way. Especially if you are in any way pointing out a shortcoming. And it's happened to me over the last month, several times now. It's, you know, my intention is never negative. Buy the game. Why would I want to rag the developer? And all the developers I've ever talked to would tell you I don't get it. If I point out a shortcoming, it's to A, point it out to the developer so they can help fix it in the next one. And B, point out to the community who might be using that product who didn't notice the shortcoming of whatever it is and fix it on their end so they're aware of it. It is not meant negative. But circling back to social media, you get people who read something and they read it as how they are. And this includes me. And so if I just had an argument with my wife and then I turn around and immediately sit down with social media and I read a post from someone, I'm probably not going to read that as a wonderful post or whatever, or I might not give it. I might read it negative because I'm in a negative mood. Um, and so posts are read by the reader based on their own kind of mindset at that time that they're reading it. Doesn't mean they're a bad person. It just means maybe you're going through something and you decide to get on social media. Probably a bad idea. Sure, I do it. But the intention, at least from my perspective, is never negative. Although many people have taken, not many, some people have taken my posts recently as negative, and that's too bad because they weren't meant as negative. Um, I am a free sharer. I am a very positive person. I am a very happy person for the most part. I'm human. We all have negative days, negative hours, negative minutes. Um, but I can tell you that if I'm going to post something, it's never negative. If I've got something seriously negative to say about a game or a developer, I'm man enough to point that straight out to the developer and say, again, like your delivery, right? I'm not going to go to the developer and say, your game freaking sucks. No. But if I have an opinion that your game is missing X and I'm just not going to buy it or bought it and throw it on my shelf over there because this is not there and they don't need to develop for me. I'm just telling them I'm not interested in the game. Maybe they want to, maybe my voice is being the 10th voice they've heard about this. And so now they want to make a change in their future development. But it's all about how you deliver it to them, and it's all about how you say it to them. And you can't, and I really don't even do that even via like an email or a DM message, because again, how they read it is going to be how it's taken. And so I would much rather get on a FaceTime or on, a Messenger video from Facebook. Not that every developer is available for this, but talk to them about it because you're going to have a better outcome. I'm going to have a better outcome, I feel, because again, things can be just taken so well. Anyway, I got way off on a tangent. You'll notice I'll do that probably quite often. But so I just want to, again, make this a space for everyone. I want to make this a space to talk to developers. And we all come to the table with, different experiences. And that's what makes this hobby so special. This isn't a broadcast tower. It's a table. That's why I chose what I chose back here. So pull up a chair and let's talk replay. Okay, before we jump into full conversation tonight, I want to give you a quick overview of how this episode 1 is structured. Right now, I'm going to tell you episode 1 and episode 5 in episode 20, in episode 100, maybe 200, who the heck knows, are all going to look so different as I learn, not only from just doing this myself, but more importantly, from your feedback. With, hey, John, I really want to hear more about this other segment. Can you expand more about that? Or how about adding a segment about this? Or, this one segment just didn't click for me. And that's okay. It's okay when, because it's not going to click for everybody in every episode. I want the show to be built into meaningful segments. That way you can watch it straight through, or you can jump to the parts that are most, connect with you. So I think that's an important part of this, at least initially, on my thought and how I feel about this. So what we're going to start with is my replay journey, how I came into the hobby, the projects that I've played over the years, and I'll try to not go too long on that, but I've done a lot over the years, and how replay has shaped the way I experience sports, this hobby and the storytelling that comes with it. From there, we'll talk about, the replay stories themselves, why seasons, take a life on their own, and how those results turn into a narrative, and why so many of us form a real connection to our projects. After that, we're going to take a look at why this show exists, the heart of the hobby as a community, and the role that developers play, not just as game creators, but as fellow hobbyists and storytellers. These are the guys that help us put these stories together. And they do them themselves. And listening to how they do things, I think will be fantastic. And toward the end, I'll talk a bit about what the show will be going forward, how hopefully it will grow, how guests and conversations will evolve over time, and what you can expect as we build this together. So with that roadmap in mind, let's get started. Okay, let's talk a little bit here before we talk about where the show's headed. I want to start with my own path in the hobby, so you know a little bit about me, how I got here, what replay has meant to me over the years. So let's start with how I discovered replay gaming. I love talking about this, honestly, because I don't know, it's part of me. It's what's got me here. So I don't know the age. I'm not great with my timelines, so forgive me. But at a very young age, I first got introduced at a friend's house to Status Pro, Status Pro baseball. He actually had, I believe, baseball, football, and basketball. Pretty sure he had all three. Not hockey. Hockey didn't come into my even desire to look at until last, like, maybe 3 years. In the last 3 years, I really started picking up on hockey. Now it's actually my favorite sport. But anyway, I digress. So we used to play Status Pro, especially baseball, at his house, and really got into that. And I would sleep thinking about pictures of 2.6, 2.7, 2.8, 2.9. All the basic game, of course. It was all what Avalon Hill came out with in the beginning. And that was kind of my start to it. And that, we had like a group of friends, and it seemed like to me, like everybody felt responsible now that the one person had come up with Status Pro and I was playing it, that everybody kind of went and ventured out and found their own game. There wasn't a lot of games available back then like there is now. We're talking back in the 80s, maybe the 70s, actually. Yeah, it would have been the 70s. It would have been, mid 70s, mid to late 70s. So anyway, another friend, he had Stratomatic. And again, it was, he might have had all three, but the majority of the time we spent playing baseball again. And we used to go into his basement and play so many Stratomatic games. It was ridiculous. And we'd stay up all night, and it was just a ton of fun. And then I felt kind of my own, like, I got to find my own game. And I found APA in a back of a magazine, probably a Street and Smith Idleman, and played that for a while. The only thing with APA, and here would be my first criticism if you want, it didn't appeal to me as a child. because I'm like, again, 8, 9, 10 years old with this. And where Status Pro had these very inviting cards, an easy to use system, and Stratomatic had everything right there in front of you on the cards. One, two, three, it's the pitcher. 4, 5, 6, it's the batter. Appa had these unappealing cards were just full of numbers, right? 1-1, 2-27. And it just wasn't as appealing. Not saying the game isn't, this isn't a segment on what game is better than others. I'm just saying it didn't appeal to me as a child after I got it. I tried to take it over and show, the guys, hey, look what my game is. And they all went, that sucks. you know, and it did. They were right. It did. It did for us as kids. Now, I grew to really like it when I was in probably my 30s, and start to really go for it. But it's not. It didn't appeal to me as a child. So I so that's kind of how I discovered gaming and replay pieces, and then when I got into the military, I noticed that other guys were really into stuff, and I used to work some night shifts, and as we were just sitting there waiting for a call or something, we would game. And honestly, I don't even remember what game we were playing. I think it was Status Pro, but I don't remember exactly what it was. It was one of those games. But eventually, I started to move into computer gaming because it started to come out on different, very old devices now. We're talking, mid to like 86, 87 now. And one of the favorite games is Earl Weaver. Love that game. And we actually took that game and a group of us, and we inserted ourselves in it. And I'm going to use his name here just because it was so much fun. I'll never forget it. His nickname. We gave everybody nicknames. You couldn't give yourself a nickname. It came from one of the other guys, and there was this guy named Ray, and I don't know why, but he was called Chubby Ray Hog, and it was just stuck with me forever. And he was, God, I can't believe I can remember this, but not remember so many other things in life. He was a third baseman for the Dodgers. That's where he wanted to be in place, or he replaced Ronce, if you will. But it was so great because Earl Weaver had these walk-up songs, and it really resonated with us. Which is what this gaming is all about. The hobby is all about. Again, whether you play it on a computer, whether you play it on your desktop, whether you play with dice, or whether you play with fact cards, or whether you do something I didn't even mention. It's all part of the hobby, right? It's all about the stories that you're trying to create and the narratives around it. And that's what it was for me. And then when I got out of the military, I kind of took a break for a little while, and then rediscovered, probably in my early 50s, 59 now. Early 50s, really started to come back. And I came back right away to APA. And I have like 30 seasons of APA, if not more. And again, I'm talking baseball at first here. I do have everything else, but baseball is what brought me, back into it. I started playing with it a little bit. And APA was great. And I started playing, and then, and I really apologize if I missed some games here, or, some vendors, but, then I found Payoff Pitch, and oh my God, that game was absolutely amazing, and loved it so much that I completed a full season. Every team, every game, I don't know how many there is, 2000, of 1986 was so much fun. And I really just immersed myself in that. And it took a year and a half. I remember looking back like on my computer, and you can see some of the dates of different things. It took me like a year and a half to play all of it. And just as a summary to it all, the 4 teams that made the playoffs were the Astros and the Mets, just like they did in real life. But out west, the Angels made it, just like they did in real life. But the Red Sox didn't, and they struggled hard. That bullpen was horrible, and for most of the season, they were in last place. And near the end of the season, they started to finally do well, but couldn't catch up. The 2 teams that were surprisingly good and shocking were Detroit and Cleveland. And I was happy because I'm a Cleveland guy. And so it came down to, if I remember correctly, this was like 8 years ago. I believe it came down to the last day. It might have even been a playoff game for the playoffs, but Detroit won. Detroit ended up moving on, and they played California. Uh, my MVP before I get to the playoffs, my MVP was Doug DeCenze. Absolutely had a monster year. Really was just killing it. And so he won the MVP. Roger Clemens was the Cy Young of the American League, despite all the Boston challenges and the bullpen. They did hit well, and when Clemens was on the mound and could complete the game, they won. Anything else they struggled with, and so Clemens got my Cy Young, and then over in the National League, it was Mike Scott who got the Cy Young. And the MVP, I'm trying to remember, I believe it was somebody from the Reds. They had such a good year. And I know they finished like in second place in real life, but they did really well. It might have been Eric Davis. Somebody on the team had a monster year and really pushed the Astros all the way to the end. The Mets, they were like division champs in August. It was crazy. They were way ahead by like 28 games. So the Mets had, so I assumed the Mets were going to just walk through this. And as the playoffs started, the Mets jumped out 3-zip, sorry, with 7-game series. The Mets jumped out 3-zip. I thought for sure, here they go. They're going to really wipe through this whole thing. Over in the American League, California had no trouble getting rid of Detroit. They knocked them out 4-1. DeCenze had a great ALS. And they moved on to the World Series. And then I kept waiting for the Mets to close the Astros out, and they couldn't. They couldn't close them out. And in Game 7, it was Gooden against Scott, and Scott beat him. And so the Astros moved on to the World Series, winning 4 straight. It was really crazy. It was really exciting. And then for the World Series, the Angels took it. They took it 4-3. It was really close. I think Mike Scott won 2 games in that. And guess who won the MVP? It was Doug DeCenze. The guy, for me, when he's on, and all of us have this, when he's on my desktop, my tabletop, he just does well. It's just one of those guys. Jason Thompson for the Pirates is another one that just does really well for me. Anyway, that's kind of what I also completed a 1977 season, and I used like 3 different vendors to complete that. I've experienced pretty much every vendor there is. Right now I'm using Status Pro Advanced. That's really cool. I've used Season Ticket. I've used Replay Baseball. I have used all of John Turnbull's stuff. His fast-paced games are really, really good. I like those. I use all the play games that Keith creates, especially, History Maker Baseball is so different. And one day I'll probably have a show about just play and how play is such a unique vendor to our hobby and how, again, the mindset is different when he develops. And just as a clue to that, if you're not clued into play games or History Maker Baseball, he is the only game, and I hope I'm not wrong because I think I've got them all, majority of them. He's the only game that uses umpires, and it's just interesting. It's an interesting thing. And again, I'll get into much deeper on my own feelings and maybe have somebody else on the show to talk about what they think, their perspective of play. But I just love that there's a different vendor that just doesn't look specifically at statistics. His games are storytelling games. And it's pretty interesting. So anyway, we'll go through that later. So, that's my journey as far as how I got into this sport, what I'm doing now. and what's going on. Excuse me again, I'm going through the flu here. It's kind of how I approach. That's why I approach the way I do. So next, I want to talk about some stories, some replay stories. And so I know I just gave one on my own, but that'll be kind of the next segment coming up. All right, let's talk a little bit about replay stories. And I don't know if this is a great header, or title for this segment, but it's what I came up with. So I'll leave it for now. Really, what I want to talk about here is not my replays. I might reference them during this, but why we replay and what replays kind of mean to us as a group. Because when you start a replay, you ask anybody, what's the hardest thing to do? Finish it. I don't care if it's one team or all teams or even a project that's a tournament. Anything that you're doing, the hardest thing to do is to finish it, right? And being quite honest, most of us don't. And so why? Why don't we finish it? And I think there are a multitude of reasons why we don't finish projects. And I think there's a couple reasons why we finish projects. And it's not just our own determination level. That's part of it. But I think there's a lot of outside things that come into play as to why it's so hard to finish a replay. Motivation to finish sometimes becomes very difficult to find within yourself or to find within the story that you've created to help you get there. The community, and I know people are going to take this as a shot, but the community is not great in helping you get, let me put it a different way. If you're looking for the community to give you momentum on finishing your replay, they won't. They won't. You could put out posts of a no-hitter like I have, and you'll get a few comments and you'll get a few likes. But if you're expecting anything more than that to motivate you, you're not going to get it. It's just the way the community works. There may be 250 people in a Facebook group, and 2 people will respond to your post. It doesn't mean, though, that only 2 people read it. You have to understand social media. A lot of people are scrolling. They're scrolling through on their phones. They're scrolling through on their computers, their tablets, or whatever. They may read what you wrote and then never give it a thumbs up or never post on it. And I think that's unfortunate. I always try. I know I'm not perfect at this, but I always try to at least give a thumbs up to something I've read because I know that does motivate people. And unfortunately, the rest of the community just doesn't do that. At least what I've seen. Now, you put out a post about an argument or something that's drama based, and 700 people will respond, and there'll be 1,000 likes to it or hates to it. We kind of respond like regular, real life. It takes drama to get people on. Who was it? Don Henley with his "Dirty Laundry" song. Go back and listen to that again, which was created over 50 years ago, I believe. And it still applies today, not only to life, but to our community. Dirty Laundry gets more people talking, more people responding, more people on social media about something than what we're all here for, which is a replay. So anyway, it's part of life. So I'm just telling you, if you're looking for motivation, especially if you're brand new to this, from social media, you won't get it. It's just not there. It's unfortunate. Part of the reason to doing this again and getting people, because I know if you've started a replay or if let's go with the finished people. If you finish a replay, the level of respect I have for you is unbelievable. And I think we should all talk about it. We should all talk about who your winner was, what you faced, who your MVPs were, what you saw going along, what were some great events during it. I want to promote that. I want to talk about that because I think it's amazing. And I think it is one of the reasons why people do not finish what they start.
because they start to look at it and they go, well, what am I getting out of this? You know, every day I pull up to my chair and I sit down and today it's Milwaukee against, and I'm not ragging Milwaukee, but it's Milwaukee against Detroit. I live in California. I don't care about either one of those two teams. And I got to play them out. And that's not easy to do. It can get very boring. So if you're not into your story, all of it, and you haven't created something for each of those two teams, at least one of them, it's difficult to finish that. That it's easy to push that aside, especially when everybody over on this group is talking about this brand new game that came out, and you're like, if you're like me, you're like, I got to try that. And next thing you know, here goes another shelf replay. So they're hard to finish, and there's a multitude of reasons why. And it's, but the ones that we can get through, and the ones that I've ever heard that have gotten through, and the ones that I have gotten through, are things that really start to resonate with me. And I've created a story. And I just in the last segment talked about Doug DeCenze and the Angels, and that just took on its own thing. And this is, again, I'm going to go off on a little tangent here, but one of the things about cards and dice that definitely separate, and I say cards and dice, I also mean cards and facts. I want to make sure, to me, it's the same thing, whether you use fast action cards, like Status Pro, Payoff Pitch has them. Many games are starting to have fast action cards. And to me, they are the same as dice. And I get you can have a whole segment on why they're not the same, but it's all still part of the hobby. Now I forgot where I was going with all that. But the whole point is that this is one of the things that happened with me is that with the cards, and now I know where I was going. Went on from a little senior moment there. The cards themselves, having them, and I've noticed this with Status Pro Advanced on the computer, because you have the cards on the computer and the fast action cards are on the computer, and I love it. Don't get me wrong, but I've noticed this difference for me, and I wonder how many other people this resonates with. Is when I'm playing a game and I have the cards, that Doug DeCenze card has like a story it tells. As soon as I flip to it in the batting order, here's DeCenze, and I got it in my hand, and that card tells a story of that 1986 season I replayed. And I don't know, maybe I'm way off on this, but I think that's the big difference between having them on a screen. I don't know, maybe I play enough Status Pro Advanced that the card on the screen will have the story, but that card means something. And when I pull up on those Boston Red Sox that year, I remember just, not that I'm any kind of Boston fan, because I'm not. I just remember grabbing them and going, and I always separate into the batting order. The starting pitchers go off on one side, the bullpen goes on one, and then the bench on another. And I remember just putting the bullpen down, going, "Oh God, what are you guys going to do to me today?" And that was the story of the Red Sox for me in that season replay. And if you have that going into your replay, not going in because you got to create it, but if you start to develop that story, I think it's easier to have something that is you can build upon. But if you get X number of games in and there's no story that's been developed, and I've always used the term of replays over replicas. If your replay is nothing but a replica, you're probably going to become bored with it. And go, you're not creating any story. It's the story that's already been told. You want to create a new story. You want to, Doug DeCenze, for me, he was not the MVP of the American League. He was not the MVP of the ALCS. He was not the MVP of the World Series. California Angels won the World Series. All that ended up being a story that I created based on my play of using Payoff Pitch. And so my point on all that is if you're struggling with your replay story and you're not getting a story out of it, what you like, that you feel you're connected to, you're probably going to shelf that replay. And that's why it's so hard. And I want to, one last thing I want to add to this one is that, think about what you're doing when you go into your replay. I, for one, I talked about in like my monologue, the initial segment, how hockey has become kind of my favorite sport. And it's because I got into going to Nashville Predator games when I moved to Nashville. And that was like church. It was so crazy inside that building. And I just loved the energy. And I was like, wow, maybe I need to give hockey a second look. And maybe even on my favorite hobby, on my hobby, not my favorite hobby, but my hobby. And I need to look at hockey and get a hockey game because I've always played so much baseball, basketball a little bit. I love basketball, but basketball takes forever to play. Football takes forever to play. And thank you to the guys who create the fast play games because I just can't find the time to play those full-time games. Baseball is the only full-time game that I can play because it only takes me 10 to 15 minutes. And I need my story to develop, and I do as played replays. And I've never been somebody who likes to just play the Indians for a season. I know people out there do that. Good for them. I can't. I need the story of not only the Indians, but the teams they're competing with. And I don't want that from a simulation that's going on. I want to, again, have that the cards tell me what happened. Anyway, digress yet again. I went off on another one. But the whole point here is that, you need to have an emotional connection to your story. And if it's not there, you move on. But think about what you're doing before you do it. Oh, I know where I was going now. Another senior moment. I want to talk about hockey real quick. Hockey for me, because I can tell you all the basketball players from the 70s on, football and baseball, 70s on. I can't tell you jack about hockey. I'm learning it. I am absolutely learning it. But I didn't know jack about hockey. History, players, teams, anything that I hadn't seen on ESPN, right? Generally, I probably went to go get a drink when the hockey highlights came on back in the day for the real Sports Center that used to be up. So I knew Gretzky. Anybody else? Anyway, that was about it. So going into my replays that I've done, and I do have one going on right now, 23-24 NHL, well into the 200 game mark of that total, playing that, out. My desire to play that was to learn about hockey, was to learn about the players. And so that when I did watch SportsCenter, or when I went to a game, now that I live in Colorado, I've already been to one Avalanche game, and man, are they tearing it up this year. But I wanted to learn not only about the superstars, McKinnon and Makar and all that from here in Colorado. But I already knew most of the names over in Nashville, Roman Yossi and Forsberg, who's kind of my favorite player right now. I wanted to learn more about, who's on Calgary, who their stars are, who's on, of course, the Florida Panthers are two-time defending champs. And I watched enough of the Stanley Cup Finals to know most of their players, and Edmonton know most of their players. But who's on some of the other teams, Vancouver and blah, blah, blah. So my motivation and desire for the outcome was to learn about the players and the teams from 24, 25, so that I become a more less, I'm trying to figure out my wording here, but like a less ignorant fan when I'm watching even today's game, knowing that some players have been traded around different teams or free agents or whatever, but at least I'm learning more about the current game because I thought I'd start there. But my plan is to learn more about the older game as well. I want to go back into the 60s. I want to learn about 70s hockey, 80s hockey, 90s hockey, early 2000s. So again, have something that you could personally connect to, excuse me, and have that ability to look at. Um, you know, it will get you farther. I know it's gotten me over 200. Like I said, I believe I'm at 270 something. And shout out to Mike Ignikowski, because I use his spreadsheets for basketball um, and for hockey, especially hockey. He has a baseball one too. I use Diamond Mind, always have, but not always have, but that's what I've been using. But he has fantastic spreadsheets. So, and I'll have him on the show one day for sure. But anyway, so look for all that. Think about all that when you go into it. Connect. I know that some people connect. I'll have probably a whole show on why we play the seasons we play. And I know a lot of people do their childhood year. When did I first become a baseball fan? I'm not sure if that's going to get you very far on your replay. I get why you're doing it, but I believe that after you play a few games and you're like, oh yeah, remember this player, remember this, I remember this, this guy, this guy, this guy. It's not going to take you through an entire season. It's just not. Not if you're going to play every team, every game. Now, it might get you through, I want to play the Detroit Tigers from 1977, because that's when I first started watching baseball, and I watched them all the way through. You might be able to get 162 games done with that. But you're not going to get 2,000 games done, the entire, season of every team, every game. You're going to need more motivation, more ideas, more thought process behind that. And hopefully this show will give you some ideas on how to get there. So next up, I want to jump into a little bit about why this show exists moving forward, and we'll talk about that then. Okay, let's talk a little bit about why this show exists. This will probably be a unique segment, obviously, to this initial show. I just wanted to give a little spot on why I created all this. I think that there are, I want to hit really kind of four points. One, first, I should say, there's many ways to replay, and I've touched on them in other segments already, but I feel, and I hope I'm wrong, really, that there are some people out there who don't respect how people replay. It sounds harsh, doesn't it? I don't mean it to be that harsh. Again, see, if I was typing this out, somebody would probably really take that all wrong. I'm seeing a concerning tone that if you don't do it this way, then you really didn't do a replay, or you didn't, because basically, just being frank here, if you didn't do it my way, then you didn't do it right, or it's not valid. How's that is a better way, especially statistically. Or unfortunately, that person won't even give it a second look. And I think that's truly sad. And yes, you should just ignore that person. And yes, it's on them, they're missing out. But it's disheartening. It's very disheartening. Because again, the amount of energy, time that goes into someone playing something and then being so proud of what they did and then posting those results, and you not giving it 2 seconds, or worse, demeaning it. I just don't think there's anything that could be more disheartening than that. And I'm not saying that happens a lot. One time is too much. And I see it. I'm on so many groups on Facebook and on other platforms. And I see where people, and I'm not sure, and I want to give everyone the benefit of the doubt, that they mean to be harsh, but it comes across harsh. Let's just put it that way. Because again, the effort is amazing. I don't care if you played your replay with dice. I don't care if you played your replay with fast action cards. I don't care if you played it with the computer. I don't care how you did it, honestly. I care whether you did it with integrity. I care how much effort you put into it. Um, and I care whether you're passionate about what you did. And then I care about the story that you tell about it. It, it, it Anything else to me, it's again just me. Um, I think anybody who comes back and says we didn't use dice, so it didn't count. What? Seriously? Or you didn't use. Oh, you used, and Joe Bryan knows I don't mean anything by this, but oh, you used payoff pitch, and they don't do that game doesn't produce X. So, you know, who cares what you did? That's how some of that stuff comes across. And again, I'm not saying anybody said payoff pitch was wrong. I'm just using that as a game example because I have seen people go, well, you did it with X game, and that game doesn't do X. And I have seen people complain about ground balls, but where it went. I made a joke about Status Pro Basic. I had 30 some ground balls to the catcher. I don't care if it's a ground ball to the catcher or a ground ball to third base. As somebody posted on my thing, it's an out is an out. Yeah, that's how I feel. Now, do I respect somebody who puts that effort in to wanting to know how much Steve Garvey grounded out to short compared to left field? I'd love to sit down with that person and hear their story of what they did because I think that'd be amazing. I'd love to hear, oh, Garvey 40% of the time, went opposite field or straight up the middle or whatever they captured as stats. They have a hell of a story. I am not discounting them. But what I do discount is when they discount anybody who doesn't do that. It doesn't make them better. It doesn't make the person who doesn't do it worse. It makes a different story. You have a different story to tell than they do. They're concentrating more on Garvey's doubles, extra base hits and the story of the Dodgers rather than where he flew out to. Again, I'm not making fun of that. I have no interest in it, but that doesn't mean your interest is downplayed. I'd love to talk to you about it. And if you do that, comment because I'd love to sit down and have you on the show and talk about how you even. I mean, I can see how you can track that, but I would love to see how you track that, and love to hear your stories behind it. And I think a lot of people would. So come out of the woodwork. Tell your story. Again, that's back to the last episode. That's why this is here. Go ahead, pull up a chair, sit down, talk to me. Tell me why you do that. Tell me why that resonates with you. I'd love to hear it. Maybe you'll convince me because I'm always looking for a different angle on how to do stuff. So it's an absolute reason why this show exists is to talk about stuff like that. Different people's approaches and motivations to replay. And that was really just off the cuff talking about ground balls. I didn't even expect to talk about that in this. So, but that is a great example of why this show exists. I want to know how you do that. I want to know why you do that. More importantly, what is your motivation behind that? Because I think that's very interesting. And then there's many things I don't even think about that I would love to hear about. So let's talk. That's why the show's here. So I kind of the second point I've already dove into a little bit. That people there are different motivations going in. Some are stat driven. I want to see if I can get Mark McGwire to X number of home runs, Barry Bonds to X number of home runs. That's great. It's a great reason to play something that will help you with every single Mark McGwire at bat. But what are you going to do with the rest of it to make sure you can continue to get McGwire at bat? So love to hear how people do that. The narrative. I think that's the strongest way to finish a replay. Again, as I said before, what's your narrative going in? What are you trying to create? Is it I want to see if I can get, the Indians to win a World Series. Good luck on that. But one of those teams that lost to the Braves or to the Marlins, is that your narrative and your motivation going throughout? I think that will help you complete a Cleveland Indians replay, but I don't think it will help you complete the whole entire year, because I tried it and I became disengaged with the story, because what happens if the team you're playing, and again, and I'm just using this as an example, you want to see them win a World Series or get to a World Series or try and change history, right? And they start out 5-20, your replay is screwed already, right? Unless you think they're going to come back, and I'm just giving that as an example. So you can see how quickly it can go off the rails, if you're looking at one team and trying to play a bunch. And so that's just my thought. I want to talk about a couple other ways that people go into things. One that I had really been against, not against, that sounds like I don't like it. I ignored, there's a better word, because it just never interested me, was fictional leagues. And I want to do an entire episode and have people on who play fictional leagues. And I have started to do a little bit of that myself. And I understand some of the benefits of fictional leagues. One of the ones that I started to play, probably the first one I ever played, was just like, I believe last year, the XHL from Play Games and Keith was released. It's a hockey game in which they're all fictional, except he threw in about 30 some NHL superstar free agents that you can use however you want. You can add them to, you can do a draft, you can add them to the teams automatically. However, you can do nothing. You can leave them out and play the fictional league. And I started to play that because I was, again, start really getting into hockey at the time that came out. And I was like, let me try this. And it started to really resonate with me. I really liked it. And I joined an XHL co-op league that actually Keith is in. And I'm really enjoying that. And I run, shocking, Cleveland. They have a Cleveland team. That was another reason why I wanted to do that at XHL. So this is a little shout out to my developer friends. When you develop a fictional set, think about the cities who've been left out. Cleveland has been left out of hockey for quite some time, since the late 70s. And there's a fan base there. And so having a team named Cleveland literally got me to want to buy the XHL set. I'm totally honest. Yes, I saw that and went, wow. Now, Keith will tell you, you can take, and he absolutely right, because he just gives the city names and they're on the cards, but you can call them whatever you want, their nickname. I called mine the Blizzard, by the way. But he didn't leave it to the point where you could switch the city names. But you could just say, well, Cleveland's, I'm going to call these guys, Hartford, whatever the hell you want, right? But I think that when you create fictional leagues, the city names is what, some people really get into. And if you look at, like, when people do drafts, and like real players, they'll do drafts, and because a lot of people do that, they'll take the 1988 season and they'll draft the players, or they'll take these great Hall of Fame sets, or different kind of sets, Kurt Berglund set that's out there, all these different sets that are out there, and they'll draft those. And then one of the things that a lot of people love to do is give those city names. And so I think that keeping in mind what cities you choose, I think is important. People are bored. I'm sorry if you're from here, but I'm just going to say it. People are so bored with New York, Chicago, and LA. What do they have? 90 teams in each city. Give some love to the smaller cities, to the cities who don't have a team. Montana is screaming at you. Idaho, Wyoming, some of the southern Alabama, Mississippi. There are a lot of cities in there that you can choose from. Don't, this is my opinion, do what you want. It's your set, you're the developer, but you want to create some stern city names. Don't use the ones that have already been used in that sport. Um, you know, uh, and show some love to cities that have been screwed out of things like San Diego and Oakland have been screwed out of some teams. Give them some love, give them a new team. So anyway, there I go, off I go. So I think that when we go back to what this segment's all about, why the show exists, it's to talk about why you do what you do in your replays and how you approach them and where you were going from. Was it stat driven? Was it narrative? Was it fictional? Was it historical? What was it that led you to that? And talk about that. And because it's going to resonate with other people. And some people are, wow, yeah, I forgot all about that 1989 season. That's a really interesting take as to why you're playing that. So people love to hear that stuff. I know I do. I think that this show also exists to just have some meaningful conversation around the hobby. But I also, and I really learned this, I had a 2 hour long, and I know he doesn't mind me saying this, a 2 hour long conversation and inspired the show with Mike Ignikowski, who is the developer of all the spreadsheets that are free, by the way, and available on his Facebook groups. And we had a great long conversation because I was doing some alpha testing of his basketball spreadsheet, which is fantastic. And we talked about just about everything but his spreadsheets. And we talked about the community. We talked about the developers, nothing in a bad way, so don't go there. We just talked about the differences and the things that are out there and the uniqueness of everything and conferences and what conferences are coming up. And we talked about just sports, he's from Michigan. So I was asking him about, the teams that he likes and the things that he does. And where, again, this is why I want to have these developers on. I learned so much about Mike in that conversation. And it just helps shape him as a person to me and why he does what he does and what his past things are. I just think that's a great thing. And so that is part of the reason I jumped into this. I want everybody to hear that conversation. I wish I had recorded it because it was just so pull up a chair. We just sat and talked. And I want that to be this free speaking in this. I want the developers to pull up a chair. I want Kevin Thomas to pull up a chair and talk to me about all his replays that he does. Roy, there's so many paths. There's so many of these guys that I've talked to at different places. I know when you start singling people out, other people are like, why didn't you mention my name? There are so many people I know in this, and I want to have each and every one of you on the show because I know each and every one of you has some interesting stuff that you play and your perspectives. And this is what you think about if any of you have ever been to a conference, what do you do at the conference? You set up till 2:00 in the morning next to I know at Play, we were in the hotel and they had a fireplace and we sat next to that and there were 150 conversations going on, sometimes just one-on-one, sometimes a group of people, and everybody was talking about everything from the games that they play to sports to things not even sports. When it got political, that's when I walked away. But outside of that, everybody was so engaged talking about all that. And that's what I want this to be like. I want it to be like those nights where you just pull up a chair, sit down and talk to somebody and learn a lot about them and about what they're doing, not only in the hobby, but what they're all about from a sports perspective. So hopefully that resonates with you. I want this to be respectful and not, get the noise and egos out and just be talking about the hobby and sports. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the heart of the hobby. Um, when I talk about the heart of the hobby, I'm talking about the values that keep people coming back to. Curiosity, generosity, respect for the different ways that we play, sense that we're all building something together. Even though we have our own, you know, universe that we're, replaying, it's still something we're kind of doing and sharing together. That's the kind of spirit that I want this show to reflect and reinforce. Um, so why the hobby, in my opinion, works for a lot of people, or what keeps it working and what will keep it working in the future. I think when people share, uh, I think that reinforces to everyone else, well, hey, John's playing this, and you know, kind of not alone in your own, even though we all are right now. I'm alone in my own little space, right? Because most of us, if not all of us, are in our own little rooms doing our own little thing. And you wonder what's going on outside that window. What's going on out there? Am I the only guy who does this? I think the hobby has shown us, of course, that we are not alone. You go to any of these Facebook sites, you're not alone. You go to any of the conferences, you'll know you're not alone. And I think that that's why the hobby is so good. And I know that it's really picked up. COVID really helped a lot of things hobby wise pick up because people had to fill time um, in their busy schedules that became non-busy really quick with COVID. And now I think people, now that we're post-COVID era, um, one of the struggles to see this hobby continue and flourish is that now a lot of people are getting back to their old lives. And with those old lives came reduction in time to spend on this hobby. And or they're finding that they don't want to reduce that. So what are they giving up? And hopefully that's not family time. I'm not going to go into a show about that. But you're probably bouncing up against, man, I used to play, X number of games a week or a day. And now I just don't have the time to do that. And that sucks. And, depending how passionate you are about the hobby. So I think that sometimes people I've seen in conversations because of their time limit that they live through other people's projects. I've heard people tell me that many a times, man, I'm living through what you're doing because I don't have time to do this, but I do have enough time to quickly take a look at your post and read a box score, or read your write-up. And sometimes it inspires them to get back onto the tabletop. And sometimes it's just, I don't have time to, but this made me feel like I played it, so I think that posting project updates really help other people. Again, you might not get the response you're looking for from a number of statistics, the likes and the responses, but people are reading it. I guarantee you they're reading it. There's a reason there's 200 and some people or 300 or 1,000 people in some of these groups. They are interested and they may be scrolling and they may read your post. And everybody has a different reason going into that, group to read, and what time they can spend on it, and whether they're interested in baseball, whether they're interested in hockey, whether they're interested in basketball. We're all, again, it's going from the reader's perspective, not yours. So just throw it out there. Understand that you're probably helping people. There are people reading it, and you do have an audience. And I think that that's what the hobby is for. And I think that also, I've seen a lot of these posts. I think they're fantastic. People post, suggestions on how do I get through. I want to do X, or I'm thinking about this, or this, or I'm thinking about this game, or this game, or this game. In the hobbies out there, the people in the hobby are out there, all with their different experiences, to help you through those, through those pieces. Again, maybe help motivate you a little farther. Maybe I would love to see people post more about, man, I'm doing this 1982 replay and I feel burnt out. And now there are going to be some people who are just going to go, it's not my job to motivate you to play a tabletop game. And I get that. And if you feel that way, I personally would rather you just skip and not say a word. I've seen people post, it's not my job to motivate you. Literally seen that post. And there's nothing more disheartening than that. Just your mother didn't teach you how to not, you got nothing good to say, don't say anything. Please take that to heart, because you really are disheartening. One bad post like that can ruin 20 people giving that person motivation. So don't be a dick. Um, just don't say anything. If you got nothing good to add, don't add, and let other people do that job as you see it. So anyway, I think that, if you need motivation, I think the hobby's there, should be there to help motivate you. And then I think we learn, at least I should say I learn from other people's seasons that they play. And I mean that not like I learned something about the game itself, like the vendor, but more about, I some of it may not be learning it. Some of it might be remembrance. Oh yeah, I remember that season with X happening. And you had a completely different, result than that happening. And so it just brings back memories. And I think that's a great thing. And I think that that's another reason why reading people's replays and their stories and the things that happened, again, depending on your approach on how you read, that you're going to read that story in a different way, maybe, but be open to what the poster is trying to put together. There isn't kind of a right philosophy for what people are trying to achieve, because everybody has a different goal. Again, I kind of went over that earlier. My goal in playing 24, 25 NHL was to learn the players. Not so much my story, even though I guess there's a story developing there about, like right now, Philadelphia is on fire. I think they're like 12-1. And Utah is on fire, and Vegas is on fire, and those are three of the ones that I can remember. I think Tampa Bay is leading the other division. But point being is that, yeah, there's a story there to be told, but that's not what I'm after. I'm not after that. That's not my goal in the story of why I'm replaying that. I'm doing it for personal reasons to learn more about each of the individual players, and who's good on each team, who's not so good on each team. And, maybe I'm going to come out with my own favorite player because he hit a goal in a big game or something, So my philosophy and my thought process going into my write-up will affect my philosophy, not tell the story that maybe you're looking for about it. And so, kind of keep that into mind. And I think that that's why I want people to come on here and tell their story about their replay and what their motivations were, because then maybe you'll understand why they're telling it the way they're telling it. I hope that makes sense. This space is meant to be encouraging, reflective, respectful, a place, where conversations add to the hobby instead of taking away from it. And, I'm hoping that this will kind of, feed creativity, thought process of going into replays and why you're playing replays, and motivate you for your replays. And keep that. One of the big things about everything we're doing is under that creative and imaginative idea. Especially if you're doing fictional leads, you're creating a completely different story. In a different, there's no stats to bump up, which is why a lot of people do fictionals. Excuse me, nose is really starting to run and become itchy. You are when you do fictional, And a lot of people do it this way, or go toward fictional, because they don't feel like they have to validate McGuire's, oh, I'm at 61 home runs. I don't have to validate that. And because you don't even know who this guy is. Who knows whether he would hit, 40 home runs or 30 goals, or if you're playing football, 17 touchdowns. You don't have to validate that, and so that's why I see a lot of people heading toward fictional, because they are tired of being attacked for the replay. And I think that's sad. I think that's a sad reason. Excuse me again. I think that's a sad reason to go into fictional, but I understand it. So, so when I talk about the heart of the hobby, I'm talking about the values that keep people coming back to it, and I hope that this piece of it will help people, in their journey. So. All right. Again, sorry for all the congestion and everything. The flu's kind of nasty this year. Those of you who haven't know exactly what I'm talking about. But this next section is going to definitely be a favorite of mine, one of my favorites, because I think it's something I'm definitely passionate about. And I called it developer perspective for a reason. Because this is not going to be a showcase. It can be a showcase and probably will show off things that developers are doing, because that's what we want to see, right? But that's not the intention. Developers are, because I've done this to a degree, not to the level of some of our major developers. But I do it for a living, not in the hobby. I know how to code. I understand a lot of the back end things that it takes to develop a product, and I respect all that. And so I want this to be, developers aren't just people who make the games. They're part of the heartbeat of this hobby. Their passion, their creativity, and their willingness to, keep building on new experiences and new ideas that they come up with and that people come up with in the community and they build upon. That's why many of us are still here decades later playing these games. It's because of these guys. Without them developing different perspectives within a game, and I talked earlier about play as an example, that's what makes this work. That's one more thing that makes this work. Because, we talk about a connection to a game. People connect to different games because of these people who lend their perspective and then provide you a game with that perspective. We don't give that enough credit. Maybe I should just talk about myself. Maybe I don't give that enough credit. I don't see enough credit in the community on boards. I see people talking about my shipment's late and blah, blah, blah. And, honestly, my shipment late posts are people, and I've posted them, are people who are so damn excited to play a game and can't wait for the UPS or FedEx guy to show up at their door. That's all that post is about. So people who take that negatively and say, calm down, you'll get your game when you get your game, and the developer's doing the best he can, or he's not responsible for shipping, you're just killing that person's passion. He's only posting he's upset because he wants the game so damn badly. So, take a grain of salt with those posts. But I digress again. I went off on a little bit of a tangent there. I really want to talk about, in this space, in these future episodes, I want to talk about how developers are part of our community. They're not outside of it. And I think some people see it that way. They've got the gaming community who play, and then they've got the developers. And they are and developers and vendors, I use in the same terminology, and tool builders like Mike Ignikowski. I put those all in the same bucket as the word developers. But I think a lot of people see them outside the gaming space, and that's a huge mistake. And for some of the bigger companies, they've put themselves outside of the gaming space. I understand. And I'm not going to sit here and name company names because I just don't want to get into that. And you already know it. If you know it, you know it. If you don't, you don't. But there are some, and I will, because it's a positive, and I'm going to use him as an example. There are some people who put out a game and then become a part of that space. Ian Brook and his game that he puts out, I think, or and then he created a universe around 1961. And I think, you're going to see a lot more developers like that. And I talked to Ian, and by the way, I hope he doesn't mind me sharing this. He doesn't make squat. And when I say he doesn't make squat, he doesn't make squat. He's basically giving you the game for free. I know, some people look at his game and go, oh, it's too expensive. You look at his costs or what it takes to put that game together. He's not making anything for what it took up here to make that game. Nothing. He's basically taking care of his costs. And all of us should respect that. Because that game is fun. He's got nice big cards. It's so different. He's got pictures. He hired an artist, for God's sake. I'm off on my tangent here, but I'm trying to give you examples. And I would definitely, he's already said he'd be on my show. I definitely want to talk to Ian about that because he's not doing this for money. And I'm not saying, because I know people take words and they go, oh, well, you think all developers are doing this for money, except for Ian. No, of course not. I know that every single developer got into this. At least I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt that they did, because they are into this. And maybe a game wasn't out there that they were connecting with perfectly, or they thought they could do a better one that honestly connected with themselves. And then they provided it to everybody else and see if it connected with anybody else. I'll bet you that's the story almost every single developer will tell me when they come on here. I'll be shocked to hear different. Now, are there the bigger companies, and I will mention them in this tone, like an APA and a Strat, who put out their games for profit? Yes. Yeah, I believe that. I think they exist for profit because they've been around for so damn long. Do I think that they maybe had some passion in the beginning? Yes. I'm not calling out their owners to say they don't have passion anymore. I'm just saying that those companies have become factories. And I think it happens to all of them eventually, and maybe that's even a goal to get to. But my point, and this is a fact, not an argument to have, that you're not going to find the owner of Strat discussing Strat in a Facebook group. He's not there. The owner of APA is not inside an APA group talking about APA. And I'm not saying they should. Every developer, vendor deals with what their reality is in front of them. And those people have huge backings, huge customer bases, and huge priorities to meet for that base, and may not have time to be in those groups. So I'm not faulting them for not being in those groups. I'd love to see them in groups, but I'm not faulting them for not being in those groups. I'm pointing out specifically Ian in his game, because his approach was, here's my game, and now I'm going to play it. And I'm going to show you how exciting it is. And I'm going to make videos. And I'm going to participate in a complete, he finished it, 1961 Yankee season. Now, he didn't do every team. He did the Yankees, and I got to be a part of it. He actually included the community. And I played the Washington Senator games Um, and I believe he played the Yankee games, and he had other people playing the other teams, their home games. Yeah, I think he played the Yankee home games, and the rest of us played different home games. And so he not only participated, he created the whole thing around it. He kept the stats. He played the Yankees. He got the community involved in it, and said, "Here's my set." And his approach different than anybody else's. And I've given away all of that. Sorry, Ian, but that's what I want this to be about. What was Ian's approach? Why did he do it that way? What did he think he was going to get out of that? Um, you know, was it just excitement of playing that set? We'll talk to him. We'll find out what that was. What was the motivation behind that? Why did he build that set? Why did he build it the way he built it? Different. Why did he think it was important to put the player pictures on it and hire an artist? What was that process like for him? Without giving away too much, I know vendors don't want to, you know, share too much, and I hope I don't pull too much away from them. Um, but I think it's important to, when you have a set, understand what the thinking was by the creator. I really can't wait to talk to Joe Bryan. I hope he comes on the show. I really want to talk to him about what I believe he's most popular for in the entire community, and that is his card sets. They are of quality and pricing, and I know that had to change a little bit, unfortunately, because he lost his printer. How Joe was able to do that. What does Joe think about it? What does Joe think about being just about everybody's number one card? Uh, You know, um, that's the kind of questions I want to talk to with these developers in this setting. I want them to pull up a chair. I want to just talk to them and talk to them about what the community thinks. What do they think about what the community thinks, and what do they think the perception of them as in their game in the community? What are they looking to maybe build in the future? What would they like to, where are they headed? All that kind of stuff. I want to just have a conversation with them, and hopefully they're going to be very forthcoming as much as they can. And again, I even want to just sit down and talk to them about sports. I want to talk to them about more than their game. I want to talk to them about what other games they play. I want to talk to them about their history, um, and just make it a conversation that you might have heard at a bar, between two guys. Um, so I think that that's kind of where I want this to be, um, and you know that's a big reason this show exists, is to create this space, where players, developers, creators, content, um, creators, people who develop tools, can all be a part of the same conversation. Um, and really just coming to my head now is even to have a space where it's not just me, and it could be me and a hobbyist. I like to call people who play a hobbyist, and a developer. The two of us kind of just so we have a three-way conversation going, um, and maybe just having somebody on. Let's take Ian's game, because his name's in my head right now, and then have on somebody who plays his game a lot. I mean, I play it, but I know there's got to be a few people out there who play it more than I do. Love to have them on the show with me, and us, lack of a better word, peppering. Ian's gonna love that. Um, questions about his game and about what he did and what he thought throughout the whole thing. And I bet you the developers want to hear what people think about their game. Again, we don't need to go into the negative. Why didn't you do this? Or why is it's missing this? Or you have too many groundouts to the catcher. Um, but it's more about, even if there is a question as to why X happens or doesn't happen in a game, I think it's great to hear the reason why. Um, I'm going to correlate it to my job. I have a job without giving, doing too much here and going into outside sports. I have a job where there's 10 ways to do something, and none of them are the right way until you find out the decisions and history behind why the client decided a lot of X's and Y's and why did you do this and why did you do this. Then that can explain the answer to the 10 ways to do something and the reason they chose one of those 10 ways, or and a lot of my job is to explain why they should choose one of those 10 ways to do something. And I think so if we correlate that with our developers, understanding why they might have left something out of a game or why you believe something's missing, and then understanding why they left it out, I think can help you love that game more. I wonder if people agree with that, because I do. I'm like, oh, okay, now I understand. And I think we've all can agree that no game is perfect. We can take them all and smash them together, and I wonder if you'd still get a perfect game, because what I want out of it, what you want out of it, completely different. And again, I'll go back to a lot of these developers, I think, created games that they wanted, that they thought were missing. That, again, go back to Keith and say maybe he added those umpires in to History Maker Baseball because he thought it was missing in all the other games out there. I don't know if that's true. I'm just throwing that out there as an example and say maybe in Keith's mind, he thought what was missing from the gaming community was the interaction with an umpire. And so it'd be interesting to know that. And so anyway, that's what this developer section is going to be about. It's not just showcasing games. It's going to be more talking to that developer, what's inside their head, why did they do what they did, and some realistic feedback about what somebody might think is missing from the game, and then hearing from the developer as to why it's missing. And the answer may simply be, I just didn't have time, or I didn't feel it was necessary, or maybe it's coming in the future because every game can't include everything. That's why we call them enhancements. They're not fixes because it wasn't intended to be there in the beginning, but upgrades and enhancements are part of the whole thing. So looking forward to this section of the ASN Pull Up a Chair, probably more than any other. Sorry, just going to say that. Right there with the other interactions when I have on other gamers and other sections. This one will, for me, going to be very interesting. Okay, next section here is called What This Show Will Be, and maybe I should have entitled it, hopefully, What This Show Will Be. Because first and foremost, I think this show will evolve. It'll evolve based on my own experiences and how I go through this. I think it's going to evolve especially going to evolve based on your feedback, or what you thought worked, what maybe didn't work, or what you'd like to see more of, or what was missing. I want it to be conversation driven. I know today's first episode is all about me talking, and I apologize for that, but I thought it was really important to just get out the first episode of this being me telling you what it's all about and kind of setting the standard here, and then prepping and getting ready for a second show, which will be absolutely conversation driven. That will be conversation with me and other developers, me and other hobbyists, and then sometimes just me talking about different things that are going on within the community. So hopefully I'm spotlighting that, and I know it will be what I like to call a working animal. It's going to change. It's going to evolve. Episode 2 and episode 198 will not look the same. I doubt it. Highly doubt it, and just because I'll learn a lot, hopefully between those. But important thing is, I want you to understand that this will be more conversation driven, and more about everybody else, and about what's going on with the community. And so, some of the things that I'm hoping for throughout the show, it will be spotlights on replays. Again, I want to give that uplift, momentum to people starting in the middle or in the end. Their due in their time and their voice of what they're doing, and then hopefully you as the viewer will appreciate what they've gone through and what they're doing, and maybe that motivates you just alone by that. So really, I think that's an important piece of this show. Again, the developer conversations, I'm hoping that I'm going to give a different viewpoint from those guys. I really want to show them as people, not as vendors. I want to show them as part of our community, as ingrained as you or me in this community. No higher, no lower. They are what allows us to do what we do, and we all should appreciate that. And I think for the most part, we all do. But learning more about them is something I can't wait for. And I want to have some sort of community showcase and throughout the process where whether or not I have a person on to do it, or some people are camera shy, or time is an issue for them. But showcasing their project, I think, is still important. So I'd like to have a segment where maybe I'm showcasing somebody's current project or co-op project. I know somebody DM'd me and said they would love to talk about their co-op project. And maybe we get the guys on from my XHL to talk about how that's going. I could talk about it, but you want to hear from somebody else. So yeah, co-op projects. I really want to have co-op projects on here. I want to talk about why they're created, who created them, what was the thought process behind that, what's the advantages, what's the disadvantages, how they're as much as how they're going. In 1984, done by Kevin. I don't think it was started by Kevin Thomas, but he seems to be taking the lead on that lately. And I was in that for a little bit, and it became way too involved in other stuff I was doing and had to bow out. I might even get back into it. I don't know. But the point being is there's a 1984 project out there for baseball, I should say that. I know there's others. There's LEAP projects that are out there from Play. Again, I mentioned the XHL. So a community showcase, though, not only including individual replays, but co-op replays. And can't wait to talk about that. And then I'd like to have maybe an episode will turn into a roundtable. And I don't want the roundtable to be, a bunch of old dudes sitting around talking about, things that don't matter to the viewer or to you listening in. I want it to be a hot topic. And I want to put in that roundtable different viewpoints. I think that's really especially important. Boy, that probably wording there wasn't right. But if you put three people together who all agree, I'm sorry, but it's a boring roundtable. And not just so much agree, but have the same viewpoints. Let me restate that. If everybody has the same viewpoints, you really don't need to hear from one of them. What you want is different viewpoints, and people who can appreciate each other's viewpoints. By the way, we don't need to argue on this. This doesn't need to be ESPN. Their roundtables turn into people screaming at each other. Boy, did that make me turn off ESPN. I appreciate. I think NFL Network does a great job of roundtable better, where it's a discussion. It's not an argument. It's not somebody screaming at your television. It's here's my viewpoint. Here's why I think. Let's just use co-op since we just talked about it. Here's why I like co-ops, and here's what I think it brings. And then I like to hear somebody else say, well, I don't really get into the co-ops, and here's why. Here's what I think it does. Good use of my time. And then somebody maybe that's in the middle, a hybrid of those three. So for me to be a successful person who's going to facilitate these type of roundtables, and also definitely want to be a part of them. I think I have to make sure I get different viewpoints in on that, so that it's not boring and just hear one person say, Yeah, I agree with you. And we don't need yes people on here. And I don't want them yesing me. I don't want them yesing the developer. I want different view. I don't want arguments. I want viewpoints. So hopefully that's what the show will be. It will evolve over time as I learn, and I'm really excited about doing this. So we're going to build it together as a community, I hope, and I hope I'm going to get the feedback from you guys. And I think this is going to hopefully be a very successful way of presenting a new way of looking at our hobby. All right, let's talk about what to expect as far as future episodes coming up here on Pull Up a Chair. So I kind of put together a list of potential. Please, don't expect these in any order, nor guaranteed to be on here. Kind of looking really for your feedback. I think that when I think I want to, I know I want to put out what you want to hear. And so I want to put together a little list of potential subjects, but ready to hear what other people have to say if they think there's something better to do. So let me kind of walk through a little bit of these. One is just kind of why we replay. Why do you do this? Again, I'm looking for different people's perspectives and developer perspectives. Why they think we replay, I think is important. So that's kind of what I'm thinking there in that kind of setup. Another one is how different gamers define replay success. I define it personally as completion. But I know there's others out there that, again, maybe they have a different way of defining success in a replay. Love to hear the different ideas on that. A realism versus alternative history. Where do you draw the line? This goes back to my saying of, replay over replica. But where do you define, where do you draw that line between whether a replay was real enough for you to feel like it was good enough? You know what I mean? I always like to use McGuire. Did McGuire have 20 more home runs than he did, 20 less? What do you look for to call your replay good? So that's the one that I'd love to talk to people about. And then creating a project design and replay world building. What do you start out with? What's your design around your project? Are you trying to create an individual year, or are you trying to create, a bigger theme around everything you do? So it's kind of more, really, definitely, a lot of these are looking at, again, what do you do on those? This one definitely, I think, is one I want to talk about, and if I can expand into a bunch of different areas, but the fictional leagues and the narrative universes, how do those look? How do those differ? How do you feel when you play, if you do both? What's your advantages and disadvantages? Love to hear, and a lot of people don't do either one. They only do one, or they don't do both. I mean, so, hearing the other side of things is always nice. Definitely want to have an episode around co-op leagues and shared seasons that are being done out there, because it seems to be becoming more and more popular. So I want to hear from the people who are in them. I want to hear from the people who don't like them or don't wish to participate in them, and as to why. And then the next one kind of really is almost the same thing, the solo replay versus the collaborative projects. And, maybe this is where the person who's not into co-ops comes in and explains why. And I wasn't for co-ops in the beginning. I've started to, kind of ease into them now. And I see the benefits of them. I definitely see the negative of them. So interesting to hear other people's thoughts on them. Developers, again, as hobbyists, what inspires their design? I think understanding, again, why developers do what they do for us, why they put out the products they put out, why they put them out the way they did, why they designed their engine the way they did. I think it's all great information to have. Information I want, at least. I hope you do as well. Another one that I definitely think is starting to hit this, and it has for a while now, is the express and quick play gaming. Does that give you the storytelling you're looking for? Does that give you the in-depth enough? How do you feel about it if you don't do them? Do you think that it's almost, a lot of people think simming a game is cheating. Because I get it, you're just hitting a button, it shows you the final score, gives you a box score. It's AI, right? All the things everyone's scared of. But how do you feel about people who do those? Do you look at it as less of a replay because they did it as an express game? I know I'm huge on Hockey Blast Express, for instance. I don't see the value in express baseball games, and I guess I'm going to give away a little bit here, but I don't, because for me personally, I can play a baseball game out probably faster, which is really kind of crazy, than I can do an express game on it. So I don't need express baseball. My games take 10 to 15 minutes and I get every stat I want. So I don't need an express baseball game. Express games for me are when I don't want to spend 30 minutes to an hour to 2 hours trying to play out a basketball or football game. I played a basketball game the other day. Part of this was because I hadn't had it out on my tabletop for a while. Part of it was because I was doing stat entry into Mike's new spreadsheet for Purple Wolf for basketball. But it took me 2 hours to play a quarter. I mean, come on. So express for basketball, express for hockey, express for football makes sense. Express for baseball don't make sense to me, again, because of the time. But I'd love to hear other people's thoughts around it. I feel like I can still tell a story using express hockey, football, and basketball. I can see how you could do it for baseball too, because you're going to get the the story out of that. From what I've seen from like express baseball from History Maker Baseball, they have an express game. I have it. I've never used it. I have it though, because sometimes I'm more of a collector than I am a player. Maybe that's an episode, collecting over just playing what you have. But that where I was going with that is that I've seen that, and you still get, you get the basics, you get the home runs, you get the, still a story out of that. Is that enough? I'd love to hear from people who do that. And then the long-term versus the single season replay experiences. And that can really mean a couple of things. A long-term could mean like you are taking it, let's just say you wanted to start in 1980 and you wanted to play every team or just one team and then take it all the way through, to 1981, 1982. Love to hear from people who've done that. I haven't done that yet. And would love to hear from anybody who has. And do you take the stats from your replay, or do you take the stats from, so if you did 1980, when you go into 1981, did you kind of create your own cards? Because you get, again, I'll go back to play. They have the ability to give you basically the formulas, the secret sauce on how to create those cards. Has anybody gone out and created their own season based off their replay? I think that would be interesting. So we'd really like to talk about that. And then also the second way this could be looked at could also be, that one team versus all teams, or all National League versus, doing both leagues. Just the differences and the experiences that people have had with that. So, that's what Pull Up a Chair is all about. Hopefully in this long-winded introduction, I'm kind of giving an example why I'm here and why I'm trying to do this. I'm not here to be the voice of the hobby. I just want to be one voice in it. And I want to give everybody else a voice in it, an equal voice in it. Because we all have some great things to say. I want this to be, a place for replay journeys, creativity, and stories that deserve to be heard. That's, kind of what I'm looking for on this. So in the weeks ahead, I really want to bring people on, talk with replay gamers, invite developers to share their perspectives as fellow hobbyists, and to keep building this into a true roundtable over time. But episode 1, in my opinion, needed to be this: a foundation, a purpose, and an invitation for you to see what I'm doing. And your time is important, and I hope that I didn't waste it. I hope I don't waste it in the future, and I hope you feel that this is important enough to follow. I plan to do this. Episode 2 will be coming out on Saturday. This Saturday coming up. What is that? I have to look at my quick little calendar here on my computer to know. My mouse is not being good to me. There we go. So that is on the 10th. Plan to do it at 11 o'clock Mountain Time. So those of you out on the East Coast, you're looking at, what is that, 9 o'clock, or am I going the wrong way? I'm going the wrong way. So 1 p.m. East on Saturday. I'm going to work on getting a gamer, and I'm going to work on getting a developer. I have plenty of developers who've already told me they'd love to be on the show. Of course, timing is everything. Who's available this Saturday? And then hopefully create a good show around those two different people being on the show, and setting a precedent for future Saturday shows to be that. I'm thinking a Tuesday show like today's might include people, and it might not. It might be just me talking about what's going on in the community. Again, it might just be me showcasing somebody's replay, or showcasing my own. I don't know. Again, this is why this is going to evolve, and we'll see where that goes for the Tuesday shows. And sometimes I may have to move those shows based on what's going on in my personal life. I hope that all this resonated with you. I hope everybody feels welcome here. That's most important. Again, this isn't my stage. It's our table. It's our table to discuss things. So I'm looking forward to seeing who pulls up a chair.